Hello, fictional. Welcome to the Fiction Series X. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei got harem with Rias and Akeno? Part 2. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. It's important to understand that Senjutsu is not just one singular art. Koka began. What do you mean? Issei's confusion visibly washed across his face, something Koka was quick to address. There are many different jutsus. Senjutsu specifically is the sum of hundreds of years of individual studies and variations of the same basic principle. The manipulation of one's life energy. With enough training, one could eventually control that of others or use the collective power of many to achieve what would normally be impossible by any other means. She clarified. If it helps, you can think of it as library. Constantly being updated by books of new authors and revised as the older material becomes less relevant. Because of this, mastering Senjutsu is technically impossible as it is always changing. That's all well and good now, but how does that help us? It means that instead of spending years training you to first use your life force, we can skip all that and teach you only what you need to know to make your plan work. Which, by the way, you still haven't decided to share with me. Albion. Revealing my presence is unnecessary, though we need our knowledge to work to the best of your ability. If we explain the sealing technique all dragons have, then maybe that will be enough. I think we can keep your sacred gear and holy aura a secret without consequence. But the sigh, Issei shrugged. Aw, what the hell, you'd find out eventually. I'm half dragon. If his life was a cartoon, then Issei surmised that the Nekomata's eyes should have turned into quivering heart-shaped gems by now. Regardless, her eyes were twinkling more than they had any right to. You're a dragon. Launching herself at him, Koka's cheeks had flushed and had started panting. Tilting his torso to the side, Issei moved just enough to avoid a collision with an excited Nekomata. In turn, Koka slammed face first into the wall behind him. Ow, Naya, would you do that? Answer why your heart rate, breathing pattern and tone have all drastically changed, and then I might give you an answer. You're no fun at all. Koka pouted. I've been in here for 7 years. I'm not in a joking mood. You can't be serious. You're what, 15 at most? You've been here since you were a child. I tell you how old I am, but I'm not really sure. Haven't had a reliable way to tell the date while I've been here. The now subdued Koka was speechless. She had nearly been killed before arriving at her cell, she couldn't imagine surviving any longer than several days. Yet this guy had made it for half his life. How did you do it? Do what? Live in this hellhole. Issei smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. Survival is very different from living. Living is something I look forward to once I get out of here. To better reach that goal, do you mind if we begin? Still in shock over her cellmate's matter-of-fact attitude, Koka nodded and closed her eyes, trying her best to recall every technique that may have relevance to their plight. Life in their shared cell was a nice change of pace for Issei. The next few months passed by relatively peacefully. After years of being unable to confide in anyone besides Albion, having Koka there to talk to as well as learn from. Though she did have her quirks to say the least. Issei wasn't clueless. While he was still out of his depth when it came to the fairer sex, he understood exactly what Koka was interested in. The morning after they met, he had nearly jumped out of his bed when he found that Koka had made her way into it and onto his chest. While he wasn't averse to physical contact, courtesy of Akeno's affections, his discomfort stemmed from the fact that in the process of climbing into his bed, she had crawled out of her only piece of clothing. Ever since the day his father had let loose with his perverse imagination, Issei had been sure to passively control his body's desires. Due to his fledgling bond with Akeno, he had eased up on that control. Since they had been children, neither had been inclined to proceed any further than kissing, the most passionate of which was restrained to avoid teasing from their parents. 7 years in prison, both in and out of solitary confinement, hadn't done anything to help his restraint. Therefore, a naked Koka was far beyond his limits. Issei vowed to ensure that his pants were well knotted and tied beyond Koka's ability to undo. The downside was that it only made him more uncomfortable as his pants tightened. Her sleeping habits aside, and apart from his training, they did establish a working relationship. Neither pried into each other's history, who had put them in there, or for what reasons. Though they didn't need to. Issei had fought enough stray devils on death row to recognize the fundamental energy signature of an evil piece. And he was sure that by now, she knew, or at the very least suspected, that he had a dragon-type longinus. While he had made great strides in his meditation, she had had to help him focus his own energy. Issei was sure that by helping him, she had seen more of his own life force than he would have liked. If Koka wanted to bet him more than ever, she didn't show it. Well, she showed no more than the usual exuberance he was accustomed to. Koka was conflicted now. If she was completely honest with herself, she was falling for the dragon boy that she currently lived with. That was a problem. Even if the plan to forcefully seal their way out of Tartarus worked, her future was still at risk. While her life expectancy would increase drastically, she would once again be targeted by devils. The current Satans did not approve of the old Satan support of Tartarus and had cut ties to the prison. As such, it was entirely possible that they did not know that she was incarcerated there. Remaining in Tartarus and staying alive with Issei was possible, but he was determined to escape and regain a life that was stolen from him. She couldn't bring herself to deny him the capacity to leave. She may be willing to kill to save Shirin, but she wouldn't survive by imprisoning her only friend. The next issue was what he was. A dragon, or at least a descendant of one. Before the attack that nearly wiped out her clan, Koka had heard rumors that certain energy linking techniques were based on the dragon's bond. In her curiosity, she had examined Issei's life force while he slept. That confirmed he was a dragon, but also showed something interesting. While the existence of the bond was something she was skeptical about, she did observe a tendril of pure energy emanating from Issei and reaching in a constant direction, no matter what he did. It seemed ragged, incomplete. It appeared to be in constant equilibrium, as it seemed to deteriorate but never diminish in strength. The end of it writhed and coiled as if incapable of remaining still. If this was a bond, an incomplete one, then it did explain many things. Issei had a habit of trailing off, his eyes glazing over as he lost focus. She knew that something was triggering old memories. This happened often, but there was also the look of sheer loss, hopelessness and despair that he tried to hide. As if someone close to him was dead. To the best of her understanding, if Issei was indeed bonded, then the bond may have been incomplete when whoever it was died or ended it. In the first case, she was uncomfortable intruding on her memory. If it was the later, then she had no qualms with being there for him to replace that bond. This brought her back to her first problem. She was a stray devil. She had no positive future to look forward to when they escape. She could be caught, tortured, or killed at any time and without warning. If she truly understood what the bond entailed, then her death would cripple Issei. That was something she couldn't live with. Something on your mind. The dragon in question was currently doing pull-ups from the exposed rafter in their cell. Koka's cheeks heated as she noticed that he was doing them shirtless, allowing her to observe his lean form. Every muscle cut and developed, skin moderately scarred, joints cracking as sinews were forced to stretch. She had seen his fights, she knew how strong he was. This was a body forged for war. Idly, she wished that same body would do wonders for her in the bed. Just thinking about what I'll do when we get out of this mess. I'm thinking I'll lay low for a bit, find some old friends that could hide me. Issei grunted, in either exertion or understanding she didn't know. Koka frowned. What about you? You never talk about it. What will you do? Go back home, assuming it's still there. Wasn't in the best shape when I left. If that fails, maybe do some traveling. I've got questions I need answering. Oh? What kind of questions? Issei ceased his vertical motions and dropped lightly to the floor. Not once did he look at her as he moved to his brooding corner as she named it. Koka tried not to let it show that she was disappointed. It had been nearly 2 years since they had first met. She was 19 now. She hadn't been able to truly confide in someone since she last saw Shirin. She had been trying to open up to Issei and learn more about him, but every time she tried asking about his life outside Tartarus, she was turned away. It wasn't even subtle. She had tried intermittently over the past 2 years to learn about him, and still he became as talkative as a rock every time she got close to something personal. That made it all the more surprising when he gave her an answer. I need to look for some people. Some family friends, my deadbeat dad. Koka immediately tried to backpedal. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I never told you, so you couldn't have known. So it's not your fault. So ready to get out of here? An awkward response, but what could she really say after that? Issei's eyes unfocused then zeroed in on here. Maybe as soon as tomorrow. Mentally, everything's in order and I'm strong enough to seal you away for the trip. Koka didn't much care for being sealed away in his array. She'd be in stasis, unable to sense the passing of time or any other sensation. If Issei died, she would never know that she died with him, as the fail-safes destroyed the array's contents. However, after seeing him fight in the pit and evaluating his life force, she trusted him to get them out of there. Sighing, she reminded him to try to make it to Kyoto. As another faction disapproving of the Tartarus system, they would be sheltered, at least for a time. As a Nekomata and a dragon hybrid, they would not be out of place among the various yokai that lived there, making anonymity their greatest asset. At night, after Issei had fallen asleep, Koka struggled to come to terms with herself. They may have made plans to escape but precious little after that. Would he let her stay with him? Would he stay in Kyoto where they wouldn't be bothered by other factions? Whether out of curiosity or desperation, she looked at his life force one last time. However she felt before, she was even more conflicted after that. Are you ready? Issei smiled weakly. I've spent more than half my life in here. I've been ready for years. Issei knew what was going on. For her, she would be in Tartarus for one moment, then after an indefinite time later, reappear elsewhere without knowing. Fear of the unknown, especially since sealing a living being inside a dragon's array, was rarely ever attempted and mostly unsuccessful. Hey. He grabbed her hand. We'll be alright. She took a moment, then gave him a weak smile of her own. Okay then, go ahead. Putting his hands on her shoulders, he focused on her life force and body, trying to memorize their condition and mentally defining them as one and the same. Once he was finished, he tensed and with a flash of light, Koka disappeared, the hidden glyphs on his hands glowing before fading as well. Well, that's step 1. Now for that hard part. No pressure, right? I've got this. Using Koka's teachings, Albion had devised several exercises to practice in his mindscape, all of them required a combination of divine dividing and the sealing technique. By focusing on his life force and containing it in an extended seal, he would then use divine dividing to pass through dimensions, then unseal at their destination. Once there, he would unseal Koka and make their escape. This was also the first time he would ever manifest divine dividing in the real world. While he had attained balance breaker and juggernaut drive in his mental training, this would be the test as to whether or not he could maintain those skills in reality. Taking a deep breath, Issei closed his eyes and took a moment to calm himself. With a mental command, divine dividing formed on his back. Instead of the white scales and membrane he was accustomed to, a white frame with glowing edges took shape. He grinned, summoning the Longinus was much easier than he had thought. Thankfully, there were no guards in the immediate area, so the light attracted none of the ghouls and barely interested the occupants of the neighboring cells. That calm, quiet setting was instantly shattered by Issei's next words. Balance break. Vanishing dragon balance breaker. But the blinding flash, metal extended from the framework connected to Issei's back. White plate, sharp edges, gold spikes, blue gems. An intimidating figure, if anyone there wasn't instantaneously blinded by the bright flash. A terrifying roar, if anyone there wasn't immediately deafened by the explosion. If you're going to do anything, do it now, Issei. Alright, here goes nothing. The space around Issei seemed to contract then expand, alternating at an increasing rate. Not 10 seconds after reaching balance breaker, the White Dragon Emperor was ripped from existence. Betrayal was certainly not a negotiator by trade. He felt at home on the battlefield, not at a peaceful meeting between two powers. However, the mongrel dragon he had imprisoned in Tartarus had broken out somehow, leaving his cell a wreck. No one had observed the escape, being disoriented from the explosion of energy. A flash spell. Impossible, dragons were notorious for incompatibility with every form of magic but their own. Senjutsu. Impossible, that cell had been initially designed to contain the stray Nekomata. He had no idea how the dragon had escaped, but now, his secret weapon was missing, with no way to find him. This left him with only one choice: to put the dragon down, before he could join any other faction. Please understand this from my perspective. He choked out. This boy, even from a young age, was able to nearly decimate a town. Thankfully, there were no casualties aside from the Shinto assassins in the area. That means nothing to me. Japan is not in my pantheon's control, nor do I have interest in helping you. If he did not hurt anyone besides those killers, then this boy is of no meaning to me. His companion was of petite stature, hooded in a silver cloak with a bow and quiver over her shoulder. Even if it means that your family will lose access to Tartarus. A prison that Hades created solely to hold the most dangerous of criminals. A jail meant to. Spare me your justification, I have always expressed my position against that foul pit's existence. My dear uncle made a mistake restoring that monstrosity. I would shed no tears if that facility, she spat, ceased to exist. Please, I ask of you, hunt down and eliminate this threat. Several of my agents have stationed themselves around his former home in anticipation of his return. Even if you drove him to them, the world would be in your debt. Waving his hands, 4 shapes materialized, small models of their living counterparts. Each was a fallen angel believing they acted on Azazel's orders, the fools. Beneath her hood, the huntress scowled. You expect me to hunt a boy and to cater to the needs of a man, 2 harlots with no self-respect, and a child. You take me for a fool, Koka. It was a mistake for me to grant you your audience. Koka was desperate now. This is no boy, he is a living weapon. He has never been defeated in the fights in the pit even while restrained, and he has the respect of several deities. Even Ares has said. The hooded woman straightened. Ares. That warmongering fool. He has a hand in this. Placing all his hopes on this turning point, Koka decided to tell a lie concealed in truth. Ares and several other war gods have all taken to watching each of his fights. Betting on him has brought considerable cash flow in the gambling that goes on. Ares has taken great interest in his capabilities as a fighter, especially one who was raised in that hell. The woman was silent for a minute, lost in thought before speaking. If Ares has invested his time into observing this boy, then this is cause for alarm. My brother will undoubtedly seek this boy and convert him to his cause. I will take no pleasure in it, but I must deny Ares a new weapon. His purpose fulfilled, Kakabiel grinned. I am quite confident that you'll enjoy it. Tell me, Lady Artemis, when was the last time you hunted a dragon? Kyoto has a population close to 1.5 million. Known as the city of 10,000 shrines, tourism and travel bring the population even greater, even if temporarily. None of them, in their hurry and bustle, bothered to look up that night as space distorted, warped, then ejected a wide armored figure. Albion. This is your first time flying, isn't it? Calm down. Now, extend your light wings fully and glide for now. Issei did so and immediately stopped falling. Fear turned into wonder as he now observed the view of the city. Wow, this is amazing. Congratulations on your first flight. Now, before you decide to partake in any excessive aerial acrobatics, I'd recommend you let the cat out of her cage. And release my power, that technique has exhausted me. Oops. Landing on the highest rooftop closest to him, Issei dispelled his armor. Making sure there was no trace of divine dividing or anything related to it, he spread his hands and tensed. One flash later, one disoriented Nekomata was sinking to her knees in relief. Hey, you alright? Issei knelt down to her, genuinely concerned. I'll be okay. But next time, I make the escape plan. Koka panted. Issei shrugged. There won't be a next time. I won't let myself be captured like that again. Turning away from her, he stepped towards the edge of the rooftop. Is there something wrong? Koka rose shakily to her feet. Wrong? No, nothing like that. Issei was quiet, even more so than normal. It's just this is the first time I've seen the moon in years. After making their way down to street level, the two were quick to find a quiet place to stay, even if only temporarily. While they would undoubtedly be able to blend in with the yokai in the region, they didn't want to advertise their location to anyone willing to turn them in. By selling one of Issei's scales, they had enough cash to support themselves for a few days, but they made the best of it. I'm still confused as to why we're in a love hotel. Don't be like that, Naya. We had to make ends meet somehow, Naya. Enlighten me. I would have pried off another scale if I had known this was all we'd get for it. Well, I think that this place is perfect. It'll help. Help with what? I don't. Whatever Issei was going to ask was cut off as Koka pressed her lips to his. Issei's mind went blank. Everything he knew about the bond implied that any advances made on him by any other than his bondmate would fill him with revulsion. So why wasn't he negatively reacting to this? Pulling herself away, Koka gasped for air. So, was it as good for you as it was for me? Her elation died down as she saw Issei's betrayed expression. Even after 2 years together, he still cares for someone else. I am sorry, I shouldn't have. I need to go. Koka ran for the door and out of the hotel, leaving a stunned Issei behind, still at a loss for words. Stupid, stupid. Koka silently cried. Of course he'd react like that, even if our life forces are beginning to resonate. I shouldn't have been so forward with him. We just escaped freaking Tartarus, there's no way romance is his highest priority. Lost in thought, Koka didn't notice that someone was approaching from behind her, though she did notice the blade pressed against her throat. Though you are an escapee of Tartarus, I cannot interfere with the dregs of a different faction. I will spare your life, should you tell me what I want to know. Where is the dragon child? Koka was now beyond terrified. She wasn't the target, Issei was. Even though he wasn't interested in her, she couldn't betray him. Withhold my quarry's location and I cut you down now. I'll find him anyway with enough time, but it is your choice to die now or live to see another day. Issei, I'm sorry, but I don't want to die. Alright. Koka whispered dejectedly. I'll tell you. Issei had only taken the time to change clothes before chasing the black cat. Where the hell did she go? And why? You weren't very receptive to her advances, so it's not surprising. Females are like that sometimes. Don't stereotype. Where is she? I've lost her scent and she's shielding herself. If Albion showed any frustration or amusement, he hid it well. We'll find her if and only if she ever wants to be found. Worry more about whose clothes you've appropriated. Putting clothes on a clothesline in this day and age is practically inviting someone to take them. Besides, I left a scale to pay for them. I'd say that more than fair compensation. You need to work on losing that prison mindset. That mentality will one day get you killed. Now before you go, let's incoming. Issei had been mid-jump between rooftops before being blindsided by a focused blast of power. Sent sprawling, he extended his wings in a hasty attempt to recover his balance. Growling, he looked back to the source of the attack, an auburn-haired woman on a flying, silver chariot. Gleaming in the moonlight, the style of her light armor and cloak was decidedly not Japanese. Trying to think of anyone he may have offended while in Tartarus who matched this woman's description, he came up blank. What the hell? Back off, lady. Issei roared. What did I do to you? The woman scowled, marring her elfish features. You gained favor with my worthless half-brother, Ares, by proving your worth in the pit. You clawed your way out of Tartarus and proved your worth as a legitimate threat. I am Artemis, goddess of the hunt, and it is my right and jurisdiction to end your life, boy. We're in no condition to fight, run. Turning on his heel, Issei gained a running start before launching himself in the air. Taking advantage of the Kyoto skyline, he used as many buildings for cover as he maneuvered away from the angry goddess. Using every evasion tactic he could think of, he frantically used his fire as a smokescreen, banked into alleyways, and tried to avoid the hail of arrows that were cast towards him. He thought he was in the clear until a searing pain emanated from his thigh. Glancing down, he saw his pants ripped over a seemingly shallow cut. Sadly, it seemed it would not stop bleeding nor give cause for the excruciating pain. Albion, what was that? She's a goddess of the hunt. Her arrows must change to potentially kill whatever beast she's tracking. In that case, her silver arrows are capable of killing you, dragonhide or not. The cat will have to wait, your life is our immediate concern. Taking another glancing shot to his shoulder, Issei nearly tumbled out of the sky. Choosing to dive into another alley, he pulled up as he found himself at a dead end. Whirling, he found himself cornered as the goddess was already at the entrance, an arrow drawn on her bow, and with a clear line of sight. Albion, do it now. Artemis fired, her arrow splitting into a fountain of starlight that embedded itself into the wall. Issei was already long gone. Screaming in rage at her lost prize, Artemis guided her chariot into the sky as dawn began to break. Meanwhile, Koka sighed in relief. She had been able to sense and track Issei, just in time to see him blur out of existence, in what she assumed was the same technique that he used to get them out of their mutual confinement. Issei, I'm sorry. But I'm glad you're alright. Moving back into the street proper, she retracted her ears and tails and disappeared into the city. Stumbling, Issei fell through the rift in space and crashed into the floor. This transport wasn't nearly as pleasant as the last, as Albion had forced it without a manifesting divine dividing, let alone activating balance breaker. All the energy had come from his seals, and it clearly didn't sit well with the young dragon. Albion, where did we go? Somewhere in Kuo, where I can't say. I'm sorry. Huh? Forcing that teleport took a lot out of me. I'm going to sleep now, welcome home. Albion. Come on, don't pass out on me now. Hearing nothing more than a snore from the heavenly dragon, Issei sighed and picked himself off the ground. Walking out of their landing zone, a small alleyway, he noticed that he was now in Kuo's market district. Home. Issei had dreamed of this moment for the best part of a decade. Taking a minuter 30 to breathe in the sights and sounds, he immersed himself in the busy crowds. Wandering from place to place, he noted that everything was roughly the same, albeit smaller. Courtesy of growing up, he supposed. Eyeing the food stands hungrily, he was tempted to steal or barter with another scale. However, stealing didn't sit well with him, regardless of how he justified it, and he didn't want to leave a trail of scales everywhere he went. In the end, he went hungry. He'd done it before, though that was small comfort. After spending most of the day in the downtown area, Issei decided it was time to return home. Turning onto the road that would lead to his old neighborhood, he passed by a woman that seemed to be handing out flyers to random people. Upon further observation, he knew that she wasn't human. She smelled wrong, though he didn't sense any hostility. The pattern she was using to hand out flyers was erratic, so he was mildly surprised when the woman handed him one as well, before she winked and walked away. Issei frowned and looked at the flyer. It was a magic circle, that much he knew, but he couldn't recognize its owner. Assuming that it was a form of communication of some kind, he pocketed it and continued on his way. Still thinking about who in Kuo had ties to the supernatural, he turned onto his home street and gaped. All thoughts of the flyer were forgotten. In place of his home and surrounding neighborhood were a plaza and several multi-tiered buildings. What the hell happened here? He complained. Stepping up to the gated entrance, he read the sign bolted to the entryway. Kuo Academy, huh? Rebuilt and reopened, now co-ed. I guess dad broke more than I thought if they scrapped everything for a school. Frowning and face-palming, he cursed his idiocy. There had been no reason for him to assume that his home would remain exactly the way he had left it. Issei removed his hand, took a deep breath, and stiffened. Devils. Here. Can I get a break for once? This is dragon territory, what are they doing here? With nowhere else to go, he broke into a steady jog towards his old training grounds. Hopefully that was still a safe place for him. Dinner was a messy thing. After catching and killing a deer, Issei had set to grilling and preparing his first meal outside the prison. Something that was both fresh and not the crap fed to him while in prison. Using some sticks from the clearing and his own flame, he was able to barbecue the meat. It was delicious. warm, juicy meat. Simple, but compared to the fare he'd had for the past decade, he didn't care. Engrossed with his meal, he didn't notice the wards around the clearing collapse. He did feel the arrow that went through his previously injured shoulder. "I was wondering where you'd gone," a haughty voice spoke from behind him. Turning to see Artemis knock another arrow to her bow, Issei's heart sank. He was cornered. How did you find me? I doubt you had the strength to go far after using that technique once already to escape the eternal pit. I simply looked in every nearby town and city and scanned each location for faint traces of draconic energy. After all, your Nekomata friend was very forthcoming on how to find you." "No." Issei cried. "Koka, she wouldn't do that. Would she?" Artemis shrugged. "It was betraying you or forfeiting her own life. I gave her no other options. She chose wisely." Issei nearly fell to his knees. "Is this it? Is this because of what happened in the hotel? Koka, I'm sorry, but why this?" But both Albion and his long-eyeness beyond his reach, Issei extended his own wings to flee once more, only to scream in agony as a volley of silver shafts pierced the translucent membranes. Now, I can't have you running again. Once the other gods learn of your escape, it'll start another dispute of which side you'll join, and I can't allow you to join Ares." Artemis slowly moved toward him, as if her kill was already assured. "If it makes you feel any better, I won't take my usual trophy from your corpse. Your wings are in tatters, your body is failing, and your spirit is breaking. I take no pleasure in doing this, but it must be done." Lifting her bow once more. She frowned as Issei began to crawl away, wings dragging in the dirt. In quick succession, she fired several arrows. Through his uninjured shoulder, his right hand, left leg, and both wing arms, effectively pinning him to the ground. Still clinging to life. "I admire your determination, but this must end." Taking one last arrow, she sent it on its quiet path, directly through his heart, halting any further movement. Stepping to his body, Artemis was amazed that even with dozens of bolts embedded into him, he was still alive, albeit fading at a fast rate. With a wave of her hand, each arrow dissipated, turning to silver dust that vanished on the breeze. Issei visibly relaxed as the enchanted arrows were carefully removed and the pain ceased. "I won't have my prey needlessly suffer," she said, not without compassion. "This place is meaningful to you?" Issei could only nod, not having the strength to do anything else. "Then I shall rebuild the barriers and seal you inside. This will be your last refuge, as I leave you in peace. Do you have any last words?" Issei strained to murmur a few words, causing the goddess to kneel beside him to understand. "Akeno, I would have liked to see her. One last time." Shocked, Artemis recoiled. His last request wasn't for mercy or kindness. It wasn't even to spare his life. Just simple longing, burning desire to see someone he cared about. So many emotions burned behind his eyes, each she could identify without effort. They made it only harder for her to reply, "I'm sorry, but that is a wish I cannot grant." Steeling herself, she mustered the resolve to stand, to leave him and not look back. Riding beyond the clearing, stopping only to erect wards that would prevent intruders from dishonoring his expiring body. With further consideration, Artemis set several barriers of her own, mainly to discourage anyone from entering, as was the custom to give to fallen enemies worthy of her respect. Her work finished, she mounted her chariot once more and disappeared. Inside the clearing, Issei desperately tried to force air into his lungs. Blood spilled from his lips, warm liquid agitating his breathing even more. Without the strength needed to continue functioning, he began to finally succumb to his grievous wounds. Unbeknownst to him or the goddess, the magic circle, still in his back pocket, began to glow with an intense crimson light. Rias Gremory sighed, bowing her head. She had just received a missive from her dear father that her betrothal to Razor Phoenix was still valid and would not be dissolved merely because she didn't want to marry him. Unwilling to openly go against her father's wishes, she could not rely on her brother's support and her mother would not undo her husband's verdict. At this rate, it'll come down to a rating game. But even if I unsealed Gasper, we're at an incredible disadvantage. Outnumbered and outclassed in almost every way, there's no way we could fight and still be ready to take on a Phoenix expecting to win. I need a game changer. Stirred from her musings, a rune on her desk began to glow. A summons for a devil from the house of Gremory. This rune specifically was one linked to Akeno, surprising Rias since this was her day off. Calling out to the only other occupant of the room, "Akeno, you've got a customer." Odd, considering it's your day off too. "If you want, I'll handle it." The girl in question was currently sitting on one of the two couches in the clubroom. Setting down her cup of tea and closing her textbook, she stood up, smiling. "It's no trouble at all. Besides, I need a break from studying anyway. Perhaps this will take my mind off things." Rias nodded. "If you're alright with it, then go ahead." Akeno moved to the side of the room, where a Gremory circle was beginning to form. "Don't worry, this shouldn't take long. With a wave, she stepped through, the circle vanishing as she departed. Her queen gone, Rias returned to her thoughts, brainstorming for stalling tactics or avenues of escape. Akeno arrived in an overgrown clearing. The location itself interested her. Usually, her clients were CEOs or high-ranking women, neither of which she expected to find here. Looking around, she noted that someone had been cooking here recently. The dying remains of a campfire and accompanying frame for grilling. A log dragged to it as a makeshift bench. Her curiosity piqued, she looked around with greater interest. A growing horror seemed to creep over her as she recognized where she was. It had been years, and time had taken its toll, but she had memories of this place. Unbidden, memories long forgotten resurfaced. Her mother and her adopted aunt, Hikari. Sitting on a picnic blanket, laughing alongside her. The sounds of a fight, mock pain and roaring laughter as the men tussled in the dirt nearby. Her father, Ryu in human form, and Issei wrestling as each tried to assert dominance in a classic alpha male superiority struggle. Turning her gaze to where they would fight, her eyes widened as she caught sight of a prone figure. Presuming the person to be the one who summoned her, Akeno hurried to the winged figure. Undoubtedly male, he was lying face down in the dust, blood pouring from countless punctures in his skin. Kneeling to him, she gently turned him over. Seeing his face, her heart caught in her throat. She remembered the faces of everyone from her old life. Her parents, Ryu and Hikari. While the face was slightly different, courtesy of growing up, he looked too much like a younger of Ryu for her to doubt that this was indeed her Issei. Sparing a few moments to glance over him, her heart broke. An unknown weapon had pierced Issei repeatedly. Each was a cause for concern, but what terrified her was the sheer number of times he had been stabbed. She had been holding him for only a few moments, but already her clothes were soaked in his blood. Each of his limbs had been gouged deeply. His wings were absolutely perforated, she doubted that he would ever be able to fly in this condition. Leaking his lifeblood, the white limbs attached between his shoulders had been severely damaged. She was no healer, but the wounds marring the muscle and bone in a clean entry-exit wound. Knowing this was beyond her ability to heal, Akeno did the only thing she could. In her panicked state, she mentally stumbled over the incantation, costing her precious time. It took a few tries, but Akeno eventually was able to cast a communication spell. "Rias," she cried. "Come quickly, I can't do this on my own." Hoping against hope that her message was received, she did her best to try and heal the more dangerous injuries. Focusing on the ones around his chest and vital organs, she poured her heart into repairing the damaged tissue, even as Issei's already labored breathing slowed to a crawl. The clearing glowed once again as another circle formed. As a master, Rias could focus on pre-existing Gremory circles and transport to them. Stepping from the red lines, Ria's eyes widened as she saw the macabre display. What on earth happened here? She demanded, immediately slipping into her heiress persona. "I'm still not sure, but if he doesn't get the proper healing then he's going to die. He's already fading." Akeno's voice had a pleading tone that Rias had never heard from her before. "Please help me." Kneeling beside her queen, Rias lifted her hands above the more urgent injuries on the downed dragon. After evaluating only a few injuries, she lowered them. "Save your strength, simply healing the wounds won't be enough." Akeno recoiled and glared at her. "I mean that whatever injured him left a great deal of foreign energy inside him. It's killing him faster than we can heal him combined. So there's only one choice." Rias outstretched her hand and formed a smaller magic circle. From it came the shapes of chess pieces, her remaining evil pieces. One knight, bishop, and rook, as well as her 8 unused pawns. Eyeing the form on the floor and recalling everything she knew about dragons, she mentally disregarded the bishop. Draconian resistance to magic simultaneously inhibited their ability to wield it, so that was out. Debating between knight and rook, she picked up her rook piece and set it on his chest. The ivory tower showed a profound affinity for inanimation. Surprised, Rias removed the rook piece and selected 6 pawn pieces, just one more than the equivalent value of a standard rook. Arranging them in a circle, the girls waited with bated breath. Nothing happened, save one piece falling over as Issei gave a ragged cough, blood pouring from his lips. As Akeno moved to wipe the liquid from his face, Rias picked up the errant chess piece, returned it into formation, and selected her final 2 pawns. Placing them in sync with the others, Rias watched as the pieces still did not react to the intended recipient. "No, no, 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 no. Why isn't this working?" Akeno cried. "What's wrong?" Rias stammered, at a loss for words. He's worth more than 8 pawns. This was rare, but not unheard of. Usually those that required more than the maximum number of pawns were reincarnated as queens, making the issue less important than finding another would-be solution. In this case, there was no remaining queen piece to give to him, a tragedy because only a miracle would keep the boy alive long enough to get proper medical attention. Lost in contemplation, she was torn from her line of thought as she both heard and felt Issei shudder one last time before breath was stolen from him. I'm sorry Akeno. I couldn't save him. Rias was genuinely sorry. Akeno had told her about the letter she had found at her mother's grave. She knew about the happy times Akeno had spent with her childhood friend and all that Issei meant to her. Well, it killed her inside to cause her queen any more grief, saving him was outside of her power and she hated herself for it. Tears burned, unshed, as she watched Akeno mourn her first friend. Akeno began to sob uncontrollably, holding Issei in her lap. Tears began to trail from her eyes, down her cheeks, only to fall on his broken form. Only the day before, she had celebrated Issei's 17th birthday. It had been a quiet affair, just her, perusing through an old scrapbook of photos from her childhood. She had willingly lost herself to old memories, tracing the photos of her and Issei, while hoping for a brighter future. There would be no such hope now, only liquid sorrow found at the empty bottom of several wine bottles. Gentle warmth seemed to comfort her. Turning her eyes from Issei, she gasped. The pawn pieces had fallen to the ground beside them when she had lifted him into a more comfortable position. Now, 4 of the pieces were acting strangely. Glowing with a fierce intensity, they seemed to splinter, cracks forming on their sides as a dark light shone through them. Almost immediately after that, the other 4 pieces began to glow as well, though they remained intact. Rias and Akeno's eyes made contact before they both blurred into motion. Laying Issei down, flat on the forest floor, Akeno stepped back as Rias rearranged the pieces on his chest. Alternating between regular and abnormal, the pawns began to pulse, seemingly in anticipation. Sighing in relief, Rias began her chant. I order, in my name Rias Gremory. You, Issei Haidu. I, resurrect you back to this soil as my servant and have you reborn as a devil. You, my pawn, be delighted with your new life. The pawns pulsed one last time before sinking into his chest. The girls both breathed a long sigh of relief. He'd live for another day at least. For better or worse, Issei Haidu was a devil now. We need to get him back to the clubhouse. He's still losing a lot of blood and we need to treat his injuries before whatever he was hurt with finishes its work. Rias was able to gasp out, somewhat exhausted. Reincarnating servants had never taken such a toll on her before. Still in awe and now crying tears of joy, Akeno nodded and moved to grasp his left side, while Rias seized his right. Pulling him upwards and onto their shoulders, they awkwardly tried to find a more convenient way to keep his wings from dragging in the dirt, but found no alternative. For whatever reason, they had yet to retract. Staggering under the weight, they moved through a hastily cast portal and back to a safer haven. Once they had gone, the magic circle shattered, leaving the clearing in peace. Only the moon and the dying fire provided meager light. It was quiet. The wards remained undisturbed. Kaneko Taoju was many things, but inconsiderate was not one of them. She got along with her classmates well enough and her fellow peerage members even better. While she didn't always care what others thought about her, earning and maintaining the trust and appreciation of her elders was always in the forefront of her priorities. For that reason, she had taken it upon herself to clean up the clubroom after returning from an easy job. As it happened, the maid outfit she had been cosplaying was actually of some use in this endeavor. Humming softly to herself, Kaneko swept the floor and then mopped it. Dusting the tables and solitary desk, mindful of the work her king and queen had been doing, she spun to observe her progress and found it satisfactory. Stepping out and taking a few minutes to change, she returned to the clubroom to find Kiba back from his job, quietly reading a novel. Greeting him, she settled down on the opposing sofa. Reaching for her customary box of chocolates, she was just about to snatch one when the room was lit up by the return of the older devils. Turning her head to look towards the circle, she immediately stood when she saw that Akeno and Rias were both covered in blood. Temporarily ignoring the figure between them, both she and Kiba expressed their concern, only to be waved off by an exhausted Rias. It's alright you two, we aren't hurt. It's not our blood, rather our new guests. Her fears relieved, Kaneko now began to scrutinize the newcomer. Tall, brown hair, closed eyes, and numerous puncture wounds all over his body. She nearly winced in sympathy before she realized that he was now dripping fresh blood all over her newly cleaned floor. Making sure to keep her distaste well hidden, she calmly asked. Who is this? Rias smiled. This is Issei Haidu. He'll be staying here for a while until he's back on his feet. He's also my newest servant. Kiba raised an eyebrow. Interesting. What did you use, President? A rook, a knight. Issei took up all 8 pawns, and 4 of them mutated spontaneously. Grinned Akeno. He must be very strong. Without visual reacting, Kaneko frowned. Rias had only 1 mutated piece, and that was used in Gasper. Now 4 pawns mutate and alter revive this messmaker. Now if that's all, we need to move Issei to the spare bedroom. He was attacked and killed quite recently, but his wounds still haven't healed. We need to take care of that immediately. Kaneko, send a message to Sona and let her know that I won't be in class tomorrow, due to healing him. Kiba, I'll need you to go get some spare clothes, his are almost shredded. Moving to the door, Kiba held it open for the older girls and their passenger, while Kaneko moved away to Ria's desk to find stationery for a note. After scribbling the minimum details on a piece of paper, she stood once more to deliver it to Sona's inbox. Before she had taken a step, Kaneko frowned. Issei's wings, still unfurled, had gouged and scraped her formerly pristine floor. The scratches and blood trail led from their entry point to the closed door. Thankful for the isolation, she sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose in a rare display of frustration. This one was already a piece of work. 1 week later. Sona Shitori, better known as Sona Citri, was currently marching to the occult research clubhouse. Struggling to keep up, her queen, Tsubaki Shinra, was somewhat worried. As student council president, Sona took her duties very seriously. While it was a stretch to say she was cruel, it was truthful enough to say she was very strict. The law-abiding Citri heiress was currently on a warpath to speak to her wayward classmates, and unfortunately for them, she knew where they were. Not even bothering to knock, Sona opened the door and strolled in through the front door before turning into the clubroom itself. Stopping in surprise, she found Yudo Kiba and Kaneko Taoju trying to take care of and feed their king, who had clearly seen better days. Wearing only a thick robe, Rias looked like she hadn't slept in a long while. She was pale, and her hands were trembling. All thoughts of divine wrath and retribution vanished from Sona's mind. Her anger forgotten, she moved to sit next to her friend. "What's going on, Rias? Your note was delivered to me a week ago. You and Akeno haven't been to class in a week and without any words from your peerage. This isn't like you, so please tell me before I lose it and go straight to your brother for answers." A very forward threat, but one that always worked. It was something that she used sparingly, knowing that the threat worked even better against her. Rias smiled weakly. "I'm sorry for worrying you, but it's been a trying few days. My apologies for not informing you sooner, but I haven't been in the best shape to do anything beyond what needs doing." "And just what might that be? Perhaps it would be easier to show you." Slowly standing, Rias nearly collapsed if it wasn't for Kiba and Kaneko's intervention. Each taking an arm over their shoulders, they supported her just like she had with their new comrade. Maneuvering around the couches and out the door, the procession turned towards one of the many rooms in the building. If memory served, Sona remembered that this one was a bedroom used when Ria's servants had been working late on school nights. Motioning to Tsubaki to open the door, Sona entered but stopped at the threshold, her cheeks burning. On the four-poster bed that occupied the room, Akeno and an unknown male were lying beneath the sheets. While they were sufficiently covered to maintain their modesty, Sona was still highly embarrassed. Knowing that Rias wouldn't have shown her this without reason, she took a deep breath and looked again. Akeno and the boy were clearly naked, but not for reasons she had initially assumed. There was a medical kit on the nightstand, used bandages littered the floor next to it. An IV drip, hanging from the bed frame, fed into the boy's arm. The room in general had the giant yet unmistakable smell of rubbing alcohol. There were splotches of blood staining the sheets around the male. Noting the positions the two were in, as well as the scaly, white wings that burst from the boy's back, Sona had a better appreciation for what happened. Moving to the bedside, she asked, "So? How difficult was it?" Rias had been moved to a chair on the other side of the bed. "Hard enough. As you can see, it's taken this long for me and Akeno just to help him this much. We've had to switch off every few hours to recover some strength before going back at it." Sona had to suppress a smirk at the double entendre her rival's exhausted words carried. If Rias had been fully coherent, she would never let such a lewd comment be heard. Shaking her head, she re-examined the dragon. Tall, white wings, pale skin, moderate scarring, well-defined facial features, and a musculature she had only seen the one time Sir Bale had drunkenly chosen to show off. Blushing at that last part, she turned back to Rias. "I assume there were complications, otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation." Kiba, the ever-faithful knight, stepped forward. Rias and Akeno found trace pieces of metal in each of his most recent injuries, all of which were life-threatening. "Well, we aren't sure what it is exactly, we've surmised that it was some kind of dragon-slaying weapon. That's one reason for what's taken his recovery so long." Rias nodded to Kiba before picking up where he left off. "There's that, and considering that dragons have a natural resistance to magic, it accounts for part of why it's taking a while to heal him. However strange, even for a dragon, he seems to be subconsciously fighting against our healing magic. And there's more to it." Sona's brows rose. "Something about him caused 4 of the pawns I used on him to mutate without warning." Sona's eyes widened. "I've never heard of the evil pieces reacting in such a way before. Have you?" Rias shook her head despondently. "No, I was hoping you would. I'm worried about the side effects it's taking. His hair has changed color over the past week from brown to near silver. His wings were injured the most and have healed well, but there's a dark shadow between the limb and the membrane now." Looking at the wing closest to her, Sona observed that the mentioned phenomenon. Indeed, where the armored limb met the near-translucent flesh, there was a dark line that contrasted against the white scales. I don't think that's cause for alarm. If he's a dragon, that may just be how the devil wings manifested, by merging with his already existing ones. And the hair? Explain that, oh wise one. Mentally forgiving the pathetic verbal jab, Sona examined the boy's hairline. Sure enough, it was predominantly silver, though the tips had a trace of brown here and there. As for that, I don't know. Well, I guess as long as he's alive, I won't fret over the small things. Turning away from the bedside, Sona walked to the exit, Tsubaki falling in line with her. I'll take care of your absences and get passes for your missed work. But please take care of yourself, I know you'll neglect your own well-being if you feel it's necessary. Without giving Rias a chance to protest, she left, Tsubaki closing the door behind them. Akeno yawned and stretched. While expending energy like this was exhausting, she couldn't deny it did feel a bit refreshing after the deep sleep that followed. Turning to the source of her weariness, she smiled. It had now been 2 weeks since Issei had been brought back. 2 tiring weeks of exerting every drop of power she had into healing the demidrake beside her, but it was well worth it. Issei would live. All his injuries had been healed a few days ago, but she and Rias had still used the devil's signature healing technique in the hopes of waking him, albeit with less intensity than before. While she wasn't entirely pleased that her first time naked with Issei had been like this, or that she had had to share him with Rias, she'd endure it for his sake. Come on, Issei. Wake up already. Gently kissing him, she got out of bed and into the adjoining bathroom. There she showered and dressed, getting ready for the school day. As she passed back through the bedroom to leave for her first class of the day, she looked back at the sleeping dragon. I'll be back soon, just wait for me. For whatever reason, Issei's eyelids were abnormally heavy. Sleep clung to him like a heavy blanket. Were it not for the incessant buzzing in his ears, he would turn over and keep dreaming. Koka could wait, he was dead after all. Wait, huh? Sitting upright in record time, Issei's mind was overwhelmed by a cacophony of information. First, memories poured in. Koka's betrayal, Artemis shooting him, and Akeno. Second, he noted that his sense of smell was muted. No, that wasn't the right word, muddled was better. He couldn't place the smells around him with clear distinction. Muted was the result he wished would apply for the buzzing in his ears, until that buzzing turned into a roar. Issei. Flinching, he realized that the noise had been Albion trying to wake him. I'm up, what's going on? He heard a grunt. It's about time you stopped hibernating. Albion snorted. How much of whatever happened do you remember? I remember getting killed by that crazy goddess, then I think I saw Akeno. But I can't be sure. She did look different. Great Red, you're hopeless. Anyone you recognize would look different after a decade. So do you for that matter. There's a mirror in that bathroom over there, let's have a look. Rolling out of the bed and retracting his sore wings, Issei became aware of 2 things. 1, he wasn't in the clearing. Second, he didn't have any clothes on. His confusion must have brushed over their mental link, since Albion seemed amused. Explanations later kid. There's a change of clothes at the foot of the bed. Stooping to pull on underwear and pants, both a few sizes too small, he stumbled to the bathroom and managed to right himself. Blinking in exhaustion from the effort, he glared at his haggard reflection. Albion, what the fuck happened? I took the liberty of looking through your memories. I'm sorry I wasn't any help to you when you needed me most. Don't worry about it, apparently I'm still alive. What I want to know is how. Long story short, it seems we've been picked up by a devil. You've got the energy signature of 8 evil pieces inside you. I'm a reincarnated devil. I thought that was impossible for me. My holy fire should have prevented that. By rights, it should have, and you'd be dead. Something happened that allowed the process to start, that's what woke me up. I've been playing operator trying to keep the devil energy and holy fire from reacting too violently. It kept you alive, the energies coexist now, but due to collateral damage your senses are currently dulled until you recover enough strength. As for your hair. Albion's voice trailed off as Issei looked at his new silver mane. I need a haircut. No way am I walking around like this. Eh? I'm serious, did I really never get my hair cut while in Tartarus? This needs to change ASAP. So you're not mad about the hair? The color I mean. Meh, it matches my wings now. Not gonna complain now. You truly are the strangest of all my hosts, you know that. Smiling, Issei turned on the faucet so he could wash his face. I get the feeling your last host was a girl who took great pride in her hair. Aye, she was. Took great pride in braiding it. Was horribly disappointed when the red one cut it off, he'd been aiming for her neck. Females do have strange priorities. Stifling his laughter, Issei disrobed and made use of the shower. As he stepped out, he remembered that he was no longer in Tartarus and was no longer bound by the enchantments there. Without restrictions, he shrugged. I guess using flames can't hurt. White flames rippled over his skin, the heat drying him faster than anything before. As handy as that may be, it's imperative you keep that under control for now. Albion's words were grave and foreboding. That in my presence. We still don't know who revived you as a devil or for what reasons. A devil with both holy fire and a longinus will draw unwanted attention and raise questions we can't answer. Until we know how you were resurrected, showing off your particular affinity will only cause more trouble for us in the future. Fair point. Besides, it's not like I haven't been doing this for a while now. I'm no stranger to downplaying my abilities, no reason to stop that now. Issei struggled for a moment with the small shirt and jacket provided before giving up. Going shirtless for now, he walked unsteadily back to the foot of the bed where he found his prison-issue boots waiting for him. Seeing that there wasn't any other option, he put on the socks provided before slipping on the well-worn footwear. As he laced the boots together, the door opened. Issei looked up to see a very attractive young woman there. Blue-green eyes stared at him in surprise. She was wearing what appeared to be a school uniform, button-down, long-sleeved white shirt, black tie, shoulder cape, corset, skirt, brown shoes. What stood out to Issei was her long, red hair. He'd seen deeds before, Irish leprechauns guilty of fraud and embezzlement so as to warrant Tartarus incarceration. But this girl took it to an all-new level. Her hair was blood red, unnerving as well as fascinating him. Red hair. Bah, I don't like her. Albion. Issei hissed. Be polite. Listen kid. Red Dragon Emperor. Enemy. Red hair she-devil. What do you think I see? Don't be so petty, besides you were needlessly worrying over my hair color not 5 minutes ago. Refocusing on the girl, who was quite obviously a devil, he noticed the other rather obvious features she had. Damn. And here I thought the cat had the largest breasts on record. Albion said dryly. You're not helping. Hello there. Your name is Issei Haidu, correct? How does she know? Yes, though I don't seem to have the pleasure of knowing yours. Don't try to sweet-talk her. Remember, red is enemy. The girl smiled, a kind smile. I'm sorry, it seems I've been a terrible host. My name is Rias Gremory. What do you know about her? I know that the family is well known for compassion and protectiveness of their servants. Though on an individual level this is the first I've heard of her specifically. Said family is also the line that produced the current Lucifer. Albion paused, then continued. Let it also be known that most Gremory family members have blood red hair. Grow up. Issei's smile did not reach his eyes. If she thought him so easily swayed by a smile and apology, then this wasn't going to end well. Gremory. One of the remaining pillar clans. Holds the rank of duke and one of most famous devil families. May I presume you're the one who reincarnated me? To her credit, Rias did not show any sign of surprise at his knowledge of her family. Though her words were guarded after that. Yes, I am. May I ask how you knew that so quickly? You've been unconscious for 2 weeks now and no one's had a chance to tell you. No one? No quite. Disregarding Albion's chuckles as background noise, Issei simply said, I've done training with my life force before, I know if it changes. I've also met other devils before, usually strays, so I know what energy to look for. Not exactly lying, but not telling the whole truth. Dragons lived for these verbal sparring matches. Impressive. Though given everything I've heard about you, I shouldn't be surprised. That gained his interest. Oh? Where have you heard of me? Inwardly, he was panicking. Has word of my escape already gotten out? The devils don't associate with Tartarus, but would they throw me back in? Calm down. Hear her out. She may be red, but any new information is important. I heard it all from someone who wouldn't have lied. In fact, it was on her request that I saved you. Her? Issei? A new voice came from the open door. Staring past Rias, Issei's jaw dropped. Akeno? His voice was equal parts disbelief as well as sheer joy. I let you have a moment to catch up. Rias smiled once more and turned to leave. Softly shutting the door behind her, she left the two in peace. Now that he's cleaned up a bit, he seems rather intriguing. It helps that he's quite handsome as well. Cheeks blushing, she shook her head to rid herself of those impure thoughts. Not now. Besides, Akeno has laid claim to him already. Back in the now quiet bedroom, the two devils stared at each other with disguised longing, though both were hesitant in how to show it. Regardless of how they felt, it did seem strange to meet someone you cared about after a decade without seeing them. Neither was entirely comfortable with the situation, awkward enough as it was. Issei, are you? How have you been? Both started at the same time, but ceased to avoid interrupting the other further. Issei's ears reddened as he scratched the back of his head, while Akeno covered her mouth with one hand to hide her smile. Issei halted his movements. You go first. Fully expecting her to begin talking, he began to think of possible answers to potential questions. Lost in thought, Issei didn't notice that Akeno wasn't interested in talking. Utilizing all the speed her queen attribute could muster, she sped towards the bed and hurled herself at him. Issei was head and shoulders above her and a great deal heavier. Because of this, he was flummoxed when Akeno's momentum pushed him onto his back on the bed, her arms wrapped around him. Instincts long since forgotten resurfaced and he reacted, moving his arms to encircle her. Burying her face into his chest, Akeno was crying her eyes out. After some time, she stopped and dried her eyes. Reaching for his hand with one of hers and looking into his eyes, Issei was reminded of the way they had first met. Their positions were uncanny, the only difference being the course of time. "Are you alright?" Akeno asked hesitantly. "You've been asleep for 2 weeks and we've been trying to heal you ever since we found you, but with very slow progress." Issei winced. "I have a splitting headache right now, everything is sore, my senses are in flux, and I'm confused as to where and when I am." Akeno lowered her head, tears threatening to spill from her eyes once more. They would have if not for a gentle hand wiping them away before gently pulling her face upwards again. Seeing her confusion, Issei smiled. "All that aside, there's a pretty girl in my arms. I'll be fine." Akeno searched for anything that indicated he was lying, but found none. His smile was genuine, mirth danced behind his eyes. Finding no reason to disbelieve him and cursing herself for looking for his flaws, she smiled in return and snuggled into his side, cautious of his recently healed injuries. "If you don't feel all that well, then perhaps there's something that pretty girl can do." "Oh?" Leaning up and forward so that their faces were level, she closed her eyes before kissing him. Chaste, nothing like the teasing older sister persona she had built, this was something to remind him of their shared time together. Clearly he remembered as well for he began to return it in kind. Breaking off their connection, Akeno whispered into his ear. "Welcome home, Issei. I'll be in, finding a cure is priority 1. Start thinking of ways to help me." "Cure? Cure? What's there to cure? Your physiology or the magic keeping you alive? There is no cure. Man up and deal with it." Akeno had fallen asleep on his chest a few hours before, trapping him in place. This had prompted Issei to nap as well, if only to sleep off the dizzying mix of holy and demonic power simmering inside him. It hadn't gone as he had hoped. While his limbs were less sore, he still had trouble focusing due to his headache, and his senses seemed permanently jumbled. Small matters to those who have been sick before, but the loss of ability was staggering for a predator that relied on those faculties without thinking. The pair of devils had woken around the same time before Akeno had reluctantly gotten up, citing the need to socialize with their fellow devils. Before they left, she retied her hair, Issei idly noting that it was the same ribbon he had given her all those years ago. Issei had stood up only to immediately fall back to the bed, still somewhat weakened. Akeno had smiled gently, tugging one arm over her shoulders as she guided him back to the clubroom. Once there, Issei took note of the inhabitants and committed them to memory. Rias, sitting in a high-back chair, was behind a desk at the other end of the room. On the couches between them and her were 2 others. One slim blonde teenager, roughly around Issei's age, was calmly reading. Across from him was a young girl, petite and seemed much younger. Noticing their entrance, she looked up, only to frown slightly before resuming consumption from a box of sweets. Rias herself was looking through some papers, but looked up and smiled at their appearance. Eager for the distraction from business and contracts, she shuffled them aside before speaking. "It's good to see you up and about, Issei. I'd like you to meet the other devils in my peerage. This is Yudo Kiba and Kaneko Taoju. They are my knight and rook, respectively." The other boy smiled and extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Issei took his hand in a firm grip to accommodate the gesture. Likewise. He awkwardly tried to move, seeing as Akeno was still supporting him, to give the same courtesy to Kaneko. "I'll be in your care as well." She eyed him warily before grudgingly accepting it, though she said nothing in response. "You'll have to forgive Kaneko. I'm afraid you bled quite a bit on her newly clean floor when we brought you here." Rias apologized. He didn't really understand the problem, but then again, Issei realized that he couldn't hold everyone to his standards. Coming to the realization that, intentionally or not, he had caused unnecessary work for the girl, he sighed in anticipation. Facing her, he bowed his head. "For that I do apologize." He gave her a weary smile. "Trust me, I have no intention of being injured to that extent again." That was enough to pique the curiosity of every other devil in the room. While they didn't say anything at first, everyone seemed interested. Even the stoic Kaneko leaned forward to hear the story that presumably was to come. In the end, it was Rias that asked the fated question. "Do you mind telling us what exactly happened to you? I understand that it may be rather soon to discuss this, but I'd appreciate knowing the circumstances of how someone came to be so badly wounded." Carefully moving to sit next to Kiba and across from Kaneko, Issei squirmed. Both out of discomfort as he was reluctant to disclose how he had been cornered, as well as to get situated on a couch that was softer than he was used to. They sure as hell didn't have such luxuries back in the pit. How much do you know about me?" Rias paused. "We know you're half dragon, half human hybrid. Besides that, all I know is what Akeno has told me and the condition we found you in 2 weeks ago. Issei winced. I guess that's not much to go on, and I do owe you answers. Though it is a rather short story. Taking a deep breath, he decided the best course was to get it over with. Until about a day or two before you found me, I've been stuck in Tartarus. Now that got a few reactions, varied as they were. Kiba's visage flickered, as if he was trying to hide the fact that he was re-evaluating his opinion of him. Kaneko didn't bother hiding her disdain as she scowled and addressed him. Convict. Rias and Akeno didn't say anything, though Akeno had her hands clasped and covering her mouth in shock, while Rias looked spooked. Issei grimaced. I guess it's a lost cause to tell you that I'm innocent. Regaining her composure, Rias immediately began pressuring him for clarification. What do you mean by that? I was incarcerated at 7 years old for a crime that I didn't commit. No trial, no phone call, just 2 Gregory lapdogs failing to understand that a half-blood child is nowhere near to the destructive level of a fully grown dragon. Issei was careful to word his statements. He didn't know if any word of his father's change into an evil dragon had become widespread. Keeping that relation secret seemed possible, depending on how much Akeno had told the devils. For that matter, he was careful to label his captors specifically as Gregory, not fallen angels, so as to spare Akeno, and by extension Barakiel, of any blame or ill intent. I was in my house at the time, trying to find my parents when they decided it was easier to catch me than keep searching for their actual target. This calmed down the others. Kiba looked sincerely apologetic. Kaneko resumed her usual expression, and Rias visibly calmed down. For her part, Akeno did look relieved, but Issei knew that she hurting due to the actions of other fallen angels. Resolving to talk to her later about it, he asked, it took a while, but I managed to modify a few different dragon and energy type techniques in order to escape. Not entirely true, but it would do for now. Very well then. Rias seemed pleased by this. Since the current Devil Kings have forcefully eliminated all ties to the Tartarus facility, it will be a simple matter to grant you diplomatic immunity. However, that status is assured so long as you remain a member of my household. So I'm to be a servant then, is that it? Issei was obviously less than pleased with the foreseen arrangement. I've spent more than half my life in a cage, doing everything I could to claw my way to freedom, and now I'm free only to live as a slave. Standing up, he shook his head violently. Sorry, but I'll take my chances. Issei managed to take 3 unsteady steps to the door before keeling over. Hands gently grasped his shoulders to pull him upright. Looking at the Good Samaritans, Issei noted that both Akeno and Kiba had moved to assist him. With their combined efforts, he was returned to his seat only to slouch in exhaustion. And where would you go? Ria's voice was kind and gentle. You're still too weak from the reincarnation and healing you've undergone. You wouldn't last long as a stray devil, much less a rogue dragon. Just hear me out. That depends on what you have to say. I know that it looks bad. I know that you must be feeling terrible that the fates haven't been kind to you. You have every reason to be angry. You have every right to leave regardless of me saving you or not. That was a surprise. You're just going to let me go. If it was that easy, we wouldn't be having this discussion. I know you have little reason to believe me, but in my peerage, I treat my servants like my own family. I would never ask any of them to do something I wasn't willing to do myself, nor would I demand they do anything of a dishonorable nature or intent without proper reason. Should you choose to remain, you'll find that I allow my servants a great deal of personal freedom, something that you obviously want. I know that I have no contract with you save for the pawns inside you, but I am still asking. While he wasn't particularly enthused by the benefits, his respect for her did rise. Issei had detected no deceit in her words, nor any ill intent. She genuinely wanted him to stay. If he didn't value his freedom so much, then her words would have enticed him into staying already. Looking around the room to the others, he saw eager and trusting faces, excluding the inexpressive Kaneko. Addressing them, he asked, can we have a few minutes? Looking to their master for consent, she gave it with a slight nod. Kaneko and Kina filed out immediately, while Akeno laid a hand on his shoulder for comfort before following. It was a quiet after that, a silence that Rias did not seem eager to disrupt. Why? Pardon? Why did you reincarnate me? Why were you so willing to let me go? Why do you have to be so honest with me? For some reason, he smiled. Why do you have to be so damn likable? I honestly can't tell if you're complaining or complimenting me. As far as I can tell, I've got the energy signatures of 8 pawns inside me. Am I wrong? No, you're correct in that regard. That makes it all the more confusing. You've spent 8 pieces on me, sacrificing the numerical advantage in order to recruit me, and then you're willing to let me walk. You're not lying about that, are you? No. I suppose I should explain. Yes, I reincarnated you because Akeno asked it of me. After all our years together, she's my best friend, I'd do anything for her. Issei suppressed a twitch of annoyance at her declaration. As for why I'd let you go, I guess it's because I admire you. I don't just mean you personally. She clarified at Issei's dumbfounded expression. All I've heard about you from Akeno indicates that you're a good person. That I don't doubt. It's more than that because in a way, I'm jealous. I grew up on stories of epic heroes, beautiful princesses, and mighty dragons. I always wanted to be the princess swept off her feet falling in love with her hero at first sight. Though now, I envy the dragon. Of the three, he has the least expected of him and therefore has the most freedom of them all. The freedom to choose his own future and accepting his own consequences. The idea of taking that right away from a dragon doesn't sit well with me and that's why I'm willing to let you go. To further your comparison, I assume there's a hero waiting for you then. My father and brother arranged a marriage contract between me and a son of a prominent devil family. It's something done without my consent and even worse, I can't stand him, well he doesn't hide how he lusts after me. The Kari would have been proud of her son that day. Not only did he not outwardly react, he even kept control over his loud-mouthed tendencies. Carefully thinking of a response he seethed inwardly. An arranged marriage was anathema to dragons, the very nature of the bond made such practices abhorrent. So then the reason why you asked for me to stay. I've been denied and cut off at every chance to break the contract. It may come down to a rating game to dissolve it, a game that I am not prepared for. So you need a ringer. Someone who can secure your victory should it come to that. I was hoping that would be you. Assuming you don't mind being both the hero and the dragon in this story. I'll be in. Any thoughts? Kid, nothing I say or do can refute her claims, she's being completely honest, or is an enchantress worthy to be titled succubus. A fitting distinction given what she is, though unnecessary considering her likely desire to remain unspoiled. Must you be so crass? Like it or not, you're a devil now. Their politics now involve you through her. This is just another game to overcome, just like turning your foes against each other back in the ring. I'm confident you can fight and win against most devils her age, it's those much older that worry me. It'll be a challenge for me to remain hidden while fighting them. That's that, but what to do now? I may not be able to hide you indefinitely under her watch. I don't have all the answers. Do what you think is right. Returning his focus to the girl before him, Issei sighed. I'll compromise then. Rias had begun to look dejected after mentioning that she was engaged. His words cleared that mournful look and replaced it with a glimmer of hope. I'll help you should it come down to a rating game. After that, we'll see. I make no promises for what will come after. Thank you Issei Haidu. Don't thank me yet, we still don't know if I can beat your fiancé and his peerage. Besides, if I understand correctly, if I was to defeat his entire set single-handedly, that would lower your own scores as well. You continue to surprise me. What made you decide to stay? A number of reasons actually. I don't like the idea that arranged marriages are still acceptable in some cultures. I know I can't hold the world to our standards, but I can do something about it. Besides, she was right. Where can we go? Kuo is one of the last habitable nesting sites. Well, we could find some hidden dragon territory out there, I don't want to spend my life in fear, waiting for my demons to come chasing after me. I won't confine myself in a cave to wait and die. And finally, I do owe her. Notice that she barely brought up the fact that I'd be dead without her help. It doesn't sit well with me to just leave. Too damn noble is what you are. Though I'm proud of your reasoning and calmly arriving at your conclusion. Perhaps fighting isn't your only strong suit. Let's hope so. Constant conflict would bore me. Issei had taken his leave and left to wander the clubhouse. Having found only more rooms for various purposes, as well as one with an intricately complicated magical lock, he had taken to the rooftop to watch the sunset. So? What do you think of the others in her peerage? The former fallen, Akeno. I like her. You said you were in the initial bonding stages with her before your imprisonment. Yes. Though I'm not sure where we stand now. It's been too long to be certain. If it time. You have plenty of it. For once, no one is planning to stab you in the back. Poor choice of words in this case, remember what the Nekomata did to me. That's partially why I brought this up. Well, your senses are dulled, mine are not. The child, Kaneko. When you met, I sensed the power of another Nekomata. Seriously? Indeed, though it was greatly restrained. I don't believe she's as strong as the cat, but she has greater control by not using her abilities. You've lost me. You know how to hide your aura, it's how you keep my presence a secret. She's doing the same thing, though it's not perfected. Her energy is unsteady at best. Like a blade dulled after years of disuse. She may not be using her Nekomata abilities at all. Issei was silent. His mind blank, he was unsure how to describe the current situation. Listen, I know what you're thinking. Just as you said it wasn't right to abandon Rias when you owe her a great deal, listen when I say it isn't fair to judge her by the actions of others. Even we dragons have our own distinct aberrations, you can't expect Kaneko to act anything like Kuroka. More importantly, she has white hair. I trust her. Why does everyone have to be so trusting today? Venting, he did not realize he had spoken aloud until he heard a voice behind him. Some days are better than others, though that has little to do with general composure. Startled, Issei whirled to find Kiba calmly observing the sunset as well. As for trust, Rias is very generous with it should she find an individual worthy of it. And you? Are you the same? Sheepishly grinning and rubbing the back of his head, Kiba's response was immediate. Usually, though it seems today, I have not been at my best. Oh? When you said you came from Tartarus, I was on guard immediately. I didn't think of you as a person, I saw you as a threat. I'm sorry for that, it's not every day someone escapes there, much less claims innocence. I don't blame you for being suspicious. If anything, I'd be worried if you were that accepting of me so soon. I suppose that's true. Shall we start anew? Yes, let's. Shaking hands once more, the two then climbed down. That is to say Kiba climbed, Issei didn't even bother and used his wings to glide. Re-entering the clubhouse, they made their way to the main room to find Rias and Akeno talking in hushed tones with Kaneko snacking quietly. Both the older girls looked up, then smiled, immediately setting Issei on alert. Good, Kiba found you. Rias seemed pleased for whatever reason. There are a few more things to discuss. As I'm sure you've guessed, my peerage and I use this clubhouse as a meeting place, using occult research as a means to operate without interference from the school. As a member of my household, you'll be joining it. Wait, what? There is also the matter of you enrolling at Kuo Academy. I made some calls and arranged for records to be made and certified for enrollment as a second year. Well, you certainly look older, age-wise you'd fit in with the second years, additionally you'll be playing catch-up on all the lessons you didn't receive in prison. Hold on, I didn't agree to. There's a host of other matters that need attending to. Your housing situation, backstory, and many more. Akeno took over to grant her king a respite. Seeing as it's quite late, you'll stay here tonight while we get started tomorrow on the first order of business. First? How many? We can't have you walking about in prison garb or that jacket you stole, you wouldn't fit in among the other students. We'll be getting you a set of uniforms as well as everyday apparel. I think I know where this is going. Rias and Akeno smiled simultaneously, something that did both endear and terrify the now cognizant Issei. Time to go shopping, Issei. Bright and early before the morning crowds. You can't be serious. Sorry, Issei. First the girls, now Kiba. You must be dressed appropriately as it affects the reputation of the club. Improper dress is forbidden. Kaneko deadpanned. That goes double for convicts. Tyranny and oppression. That's what this is. Sorry, Issei, but you'll thank us when this is over. Besides, I've been meaning to go shopping anyway. Akeno smirked. I really should be thanking you for the excuse. Perhaps you should have stayed in Tartarus. It may have been safer there. End of the part 2. So how was this story? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this story with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.